You really don't remember last night, do you?
You don't remember anything from last night, do you? The voice was smooth, funny, and dangerously calm. Cale Thorne's eyes flew open. The voice didn't just shake him. The sight of the woman in his kitchen, nonchalantly sipping from his chipped coffee mug and wearing only his white dress shirt, did too. Her blonde hair was down and wet at the ends, and she wasn't wearing any pants. The early morning light coming through the blinds made everything seem like a dream. But when she turned and looked him straight in the eye, it was real. Cale responded, "You're in my house," his voice scratchy and uncertain. She smiled like she owned the place. "Correction, this building belongs to my company. And you? You saved my life." Cale blinked. His heart raced. He heard small footsteps down the hall. His 6-year-old kid was waking up. This was not just a dream. It was the beginning of something real and hard. Very hard. This is a Black story about respect, strength, and what happens when a guy with little meets a woman with everything, and neither is ready for the storm that comes next. If you're new here, stay and watch Hidden Worth. This story, it's going to hit you hard. Cale Thorne is the man, 33, Black, dad by himself. Good with tools, poor with money, yet rich in character. A father who tells his son that being impoverished doesn't mean you're broken. And what about the woman? Alyssa Vane, white, strong, and untouchable, the head of the firm that owns part of East Liberty. He pulled her out of a burning Mercedes on the side of a highway during a thunderstorm last night. No cameras allowed. There are no witnesses, just gut feeling and heart. Now she's standing in his kitchen with no shoes on, as if she's at home.
What happens next will challenge everything. Our pride, our race, our power, and the hard truth about what we owe one another in respect, not money. This isn't just a narrative about saving someone. It's a story of redemption. And it starts with an apology that makes him freeze. Cale Thorne didn't have much, but he acted like he did. He was the type of guy who always kept his clothing ironed, even when the dryer barely worked. The kind of person who taught his 6-year-old son to say thank you, even when they just got scraps from the world. He wasn't affluent, not by a long way, but he possessed pride, which was stronger than money and louder than status. He lived on the second story of an old brick apartment building in East Liberty, Pittsburgh. The kind of neighborhood where there were more potholes than parking spaces, where gentrification was right around the corner, and where people like Cale were informed without words that they didn't belong. Cale, on the other hand, stayed. Not because he couldn't leave, but because he wanted to make something genuine for his son. Zion. That boy meant everything to me. At 6 years old, he was full of questions, curious about everything, and loved taking things apart that could be unscrewed. His skin was a deep, dark color, just like his father's. His smile was just as rapid, and his eyes were just as sharp. Zion didn't have a lot of toys, but if you gave him a broken clock and a screwdriver, he would be happy for hours. Cale did odd jobs as a freelancer. Not the type you call from a business. He couldn't afford that kind of license. He got work from friends, neighbors, and anyone else who needed a toilet fixed or wiring done. The labor was honest, but the money was not always fair, and the hours were long. But it kept them going. Cale had to deal with broken pipes and late rent most days. Most nights, he read Zion bedtime stories about superheroes who looked like him. In these stories, the underdog didn't just survive. He got stronger, even when things were hard. He never went out with anyone. I never had the time. And to be honest, too many women didn't even notice him. Because he was a dad who lived alone. Because he lived in East Liberty.
Because he was black. Cale wasn't angry. He was just worn out. He didn't think twice when a white woman in a $1,000 blouse came up comatose in a wrecked Mercedes. He didn't think about race, power, or what would happen. He just dragged her out of the fire. And when she woke up the next morning in his clothes, in his kitchen, and said things he didn't know how to answer, that's when everything started to change. It was because the woman he saved was special. Alyssa Vane was her name, and she was about to change everything for him. It seemed like any other night at first, quiet, dirty, and normal. Cale had just finished replacing a malfunctioning heater in an old house on Hamilton Avenue at the last minute. The compensation wasn't fantastic, but the family had kids, and winter was coming. He couldn't say no. The sky had turned violent by the time he put down his tools. He got on the road just as the first drops of rain hit his windshield. The moon was hidden behind thick, gloomy clouds. It quickly developed into a downpour, angry, unending rain that seemed to be punishing the pavement. His wipers had a hard time. The headlights hardly broke through the fog. Cale held on to the steering wheel tighter, his heart racing with the unsettling thought that most people wouldn't be on the road if they didn't have to be.
He saw it then. A silver Mercedes was just past the turn. Its nose was buried in a telephone pole, its hood was crumpled like foil, and smoke was coming from the engine. Cale slammed on the brakes, and the tires slid a little on the damp asphalt. No soul around, no alarms, no lights for emergencies. The only sounds were the pouring rain and the hissing of an engine that was getting too hot. He ran out of his pickup. He saw her as he got closer. Her head was down, her face was pallid, and her chest scarcely moved. There were cracks all over the glass, and the driver's door was stuck shut. He tried the handle, but nothing happened. The rain soaked him to the bone. He took a tire iron out of his truck and broke the glass on the passenger side. The glass broke, and water sprayed on the leather seats. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he yelled over the noise of the storm. She moved and groaned softly. Her seatbelt was really tight. Cale climbed halfway in, his heart thumping. The scent of leaking gas hit him like a slap. "Stay with me," he said. He took out his pocket knife, cut the belt, and then pulled her into his arms just as the engine started. There were flames coming out of the front of the car. Cale didn't turn around. He hauled her back to his truck, breathing hard and straining every muscle. He put her on the seat, covered her with a blanket, and drove. The hospital was 10 miles distant, but most of the routes were closed or flooded. He turned the wheel toward the only destination he could think of: home. That night, Cale didn't get much sleep. He sat on the old couch in the living room, watching the clock and the door to the bedroom. The storm outside was over, but the storm inside his chest was still going on. The woman he had saved from a blazing car was now sleeping in his bed, wrapped in clean blankets, with her clothes drying by the radiator. She didn't say much on the way home, only a few garbled syllables, and the name, Alyssa. Cale was awake by 6 a.m., making coffee and attempting to make sense of it all. He still didn't know who she was. Shoes that cost a lot, watch by a designer, diamond earrings that are probably worth more than his automobile. But none of that mattered when her life was in danger. He thought she would depart quietly when she woke up. You might thank him, not sure. He didn't see what was coming next. She left his room barefoot and wearing his clean white dress shirt, which he only wore to job interviews and funerals. She wore it with the sleeves rolled up and the collar wide open, so it was a touch too big for her. Her hair, which was blonde, was still a little wet, and she was holding one of his old coffee mugs, the one with the fading Batman emblem on it. Cale stopped. She acted like she belonged in his small flat. "Morning," she said, as if this were just another Thursday. He was surprised when he said, "You're wearing my shirt." You left me with wet clothes and no towel, she said as she drank her coffee. This was dangling from the chair's back. I hope you don't mind. Kale blinked. I thought you would be gone. Why would I go? She raised an eyebrow and questioned, What? You saved my life. And this coffee isn't so bad. Small footsteps padded across the floor before he could answer. Zion rubbed his eyes and looked out from behind the wall in the corridor. Who's that, Daddy? Alyssa glanced to him and immediately softened. She crouched to eye level. I'm someone your dad helped last night, she added gently. He's a hero. Kale's face got hot. He didn't think the morning would go like this, and he still didn't know who she truly was. But that was about to change. The smell of coffee was strong in the air, but the silence that followed wasn't warm. Kale stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed, watching Alyssa wander around like she owned the place. She poured herself a second cup as if she were at home, as if this were just another morning in a penthouse. He coughed. Do you always feel this at ease, waking up in a strange place? She looked back over her shoulder. Only if the stranger saves my life. Do you do that often? I help people who don't crash $100,000 cars into power poles on a regular basis. Her face didn't change, but the smile got a little smaller. Kale looked away and began to wash a pan that didn't need it. He needed to do something with his hands. Anything. Do you have a name, or should I keep calling you Mercedes Girl in my head? She said, Alyssa. Alyssa Vane. His hand stopped scrubbing for a moment. That name sounded familiar. He glanced up. Vane, like Vane Corp? She nodded and took a sip. CEO, guilty. A beat went by. Kale's jaw got tight. That explains the watch, and the way they act. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Kale turned to look at her. Let me guess. You assumed you could just show some cash, say thanks, and leave. That's how things work in your world, right? Alyssa's body became tense. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Kale responded, You didn't mean anything. That's the issue. He pointed to the stack of money she had silently put on the table earlier. Hundreds of neatly arranged bills. At least $2,000. You think, he said as he tapped the money, fixes what you came in for? You went into a black man's house, a father who was alone, in a community where your business has been slowly buying up homes and driving up prices. And the first thing you do is try to bribe me? Alyssa blinked. She looked unsure for the first time. I wasn't paying you off, she continued, her voice lower now. I was trying to say thank you. Kale answered, No, you were trying to make it a deal, like my kindness costs something. His voice kept calm, but his statements were clear and sharp. And let me guess, he said, if I looked different, if my skin was lighter, maybe you would have asked first. You might have just said, thanks, but you saw me and thought I would need the money. A long pause. Alyssa opened her mouth and then closed it again. He left without needing her to answer. Some things are best left unsaid. Alyssa left soon after. She didn't say much. She just quietly picked up her stuff, put the shirt back on the armrest, and strolled out into the morning light. Her driver was already outside, waiting in a black sedan with tinted windows that masked the life she came from. Kale didn't go with them. He didn't see her leave. He merely stood in the kitchen, looking at the money she had left behind and the cup she had drunk from. He felt more bitter than the coffee in his chest. Zion sat on the couch with his legs dangling and ate dry cereal from the box. Was she mad, Daddy? Kale stared at his son and then crouched down next to him. No, buddy, she just didn't get it. Because she has money? Kale grinned, but his eyes didn't show it. Because some people only see what they expect, not what is there. Kale heard the news later that afternoon as he was fixing a leaky sink for Mrs. Ellison 2 buildings away. The TV in the living room was on and set to a local channel. Breaking news. Alyssa Vane, the CEO of Vane Corp, was in a car accident last night that almost killed her. According to sources, she is getting better and should be back at work by the end of the week. There was a picture of her on the screen. She was standing in front of the Vane Corp headquarters, hair done, cosmetics on, and looking polished and clean. No mention of the man who saved her life. There is no picture of Kyle bringing her out of the fire. Money, power, and control are all the same. Mrs. Ellison peeked over her glasses. "Didn't you say you were in Hamilton last night?" Kyle nodded slowly. "Yes, I was." Kyle sat on the edge of his bed that night and looked up at the ceiling. Memories came back like smoke. He recalls being 22 and sitting in the back of a police car with his hands zip-tied behind him because he fit a description. All he had been doing was waiting outside a store for a friend. He remembered how the cops stared at him like he was a problem, not a person. He recalls going to an interview for a job at a computer business in his best suit and being informed, "You're not quite the culture fit we're looking for." He remembered how people used to follow him around hardware stores, pulled aside for random checks, watched, judged, ignored, and now disregarded. He saved a person's life, and he didn't even get a name drop in return. Kyle didn't want to be famous, but erasure, that hurt. It always did. He put the blanket over Zion, kissed him on the forehead, and said, "Don't ever let them decide how much you're worth." Because Kyle knew what it was like to not be seen. He promised his son he would never do that. 3 days went by. Kyle didn't think she would see her again. Not after how things turned out. Not after she left without saying anything else. That kind of quiet said a lot. But the cosmos has a strange sense of humor. On a Saturday afternoon, it happened. Zion was playing with a borrowed soccer ball nearby, while Kale was unclogging a drain in the kitchen of the community center. The director came over to him. She said, "There's a guest here to see you," with her eyebrows lifted. Kale used a rag to clean his hands. "I didn't plan anything." "That's what makes it interesting," she replied as she stepped aside. The doors to the gym opened, and Alyssa Vane stepped in. Not in high heels, not in a fancy suit. She wore a navy blue blouse, jeans, and sneakers. She had her hair up and didn't wear much makeup. No group of people, no bodyguard, only her. And a group of people with cameras. Kale's stomach churned. He mumbled, "Of course, now you bring the cameras." But she didn't go to him. She strolled right by him and into the middle of the room, where dozens of people were gathered for a community Q&A on housing policy. Half of the lease agreements in the building had the Vane Corp logo on them. Everyone knew the name. Everyone had something to say. Alyssa took the microphone. She started with, "Good afternoon." Her voice was calm, but her hands shook a little. "Alyssa Vane is my name. I owe you all an apology." People looked. People stopped talking. Kale stood there with his arms crossed and didn't move. "3 nights ago, I was in a car accident," she said. "My car was wrecked close to Hamilton Avenue. If it weren't for a man who lives in this area, I wouldn't be standing here today. A man who didn't want to know who I was. They didn't ask how much I could pay. All he did was help." She stared Kale in the eye. "I didn't thank him the right way. I tried to put money on a moment that money couldn't buy. He was right when he reminded me of it." A break. Men like Kale Thorne are too often ignored, disregarded, or erased. Not today. Not here. Not anymore. There was silence. Kale didn't even know what to say. Alyssa then quietly gestured to a man in the back of the room. He hit the play button on a projector screen. Video from security cameras, grainy, from the gas station close to the crash. It showed Kale taking her out of the car, carrying her through the rain, rescuing her. Her voice broke. That man saved me, and I'm sorry I didn't see him sooner. Cale didn't feel invisible for the first time. He felt like people could see him. Cale felt something like calm for the first time in a long time. That day, many clapped, not to show off, but because they meant it. Neighbors gave him a nod of respect. Zion informed his teacher, "My daddy's a hero." That night, as Cale put him to bed, Zion whispered, "She said sorry, Daddy. That indicates she really meant it, right?" Cale smiled. "Yeah, buddy. Sometimes saying sorry is all that matters." But what about the next morning? Things changed. It was 9 in the morning when there was a knock, not the nice type, the sort that carried weight. Cale answered the door and saw a man in a Vanecorp polo shirt holding a clipboard. "Cale Thorne." "Who's asking?" "Services for managing property. This is a legal notice to leave. 30 days. Cale blinked. "What?" He gave the man an envelope. "Your lease has been marked. Your unit is part of a plan to reorganize the company's assets. No appeal. I just deliver." He turned around and left. Kyle stood still, his fingers wrapped around the big packet. There was a typed letter inside that was cold, legal, and final. "Your lease is over right away. No reason, without warning, no reason given." He couldn't believe what he saw on the page. After all that, they were still trying to get rid of him? He felt anger in his chest. He drove straight to the Vanecorp Tower. Floors with marble. There is security at every entry. He didn't care. He walked right up to the front desk. "I need to talk to Alyssa Vane. Now." The receptionist thought for a moment. "Do you have a meeting?" "No, but tell her it's Kyle Thorne. She'll find out." 10 minutes went by, then 20. The elevator doors finally opened, and there she was. At first, Alyssa was confused when she walked out. Then she spotted the envelope he was holding. "What is this?" Kyle asked, his voice quiet but piercing. She took it and looked at the letter. Her face transformed. "I didn't give permission for this," she said right away. "This isn't from my office." Kyle snapped, "Well, it has your name on it." Alyssa turned and yelled something at her assistant. "Get legal, right now." Kyle's jaw was clenched as he observed her. She came back a few minutes later. "Someone in housing operations made this happen. They said your lease was not valid because of a technicality. Old paperwork. It was done automatically." He raised an eyebrow. "Racism that happens automatically, huh?" Alyssa didn't say anything. She stared him right in the eye. "I'll take care of it." "Are you sure? Because this seems like getting the boot to the curb after being appreciated." "I said I would fix it." And she did. The notification was taken back within hours. She signed a deed at the end of the week. Cale now owned the apartment. No rent, no danger, no strings attached. But that wasn't the only thing she had to offer. Alyssa phoned Cale a few days after the eviction scare. Not a text, not an email, a real call. "Can we get together?" she asked. Cale thought about it for a moment. "This is about more housing drama?" She responded softly, "No, this is about something more important, and I believe it should be you." They met at a quiet coffee shop outside of town, away from the news and the stress. Cale came in and saw Alyssa sitting down. She was dressed casually, with no makeup on and her hair pulled back into a ponytail. She looked like a person. She pushed a folder across the table. He took it out. There were pages inside, such as prototypes, blueprints, and projections. "What is this?" "It's a new project," she remarked. "I want to set up a fund for people who are single parents, especially fathers that are black." Cale looked up and squinted. Why me? Because you stand for something rare, she said, something real. The system isn't set up to help men like you succeed, but you're still here, still in the struggle. I don't want to just say thanks. I want to do something that really matters. Cale sat back in his chair. You're talking about a public relations move. No, she answered firmly. I'm talking about the effect, but I won't do it without you. I want you to be in charge of the community. Make it look good. Take charge of it. Make sure it really helps people. He was quiet for a while, just turned the pages. Breakdowns of the budget, training for jobs, childcare payments, grants for school, all under a name that has been suggested. The Thorn Project. He responded, You used my name, in a low voice. I hope that's okay.
He looked up again. Her eyes didn't move. He said, I don't want photo ops. I don't do cameras. Then we won't have them. No red carpets. No buzzwords. I promise. No empty speeches. She nodded. He looked at her for a while longer. Are you really going to do this? As serious as the night you pulled me out of the fire. He changed in some way. The walls didn't fall, but they did get softer. Cale closed the folder and stated, You do it my way. No business nonsense. No sympathy. Just help that works. Real people. Alyssa reached out her hand. Deal. He took it. Her grip was strong but warm. Same. At that moment, something new was born, and it wasn't business or charity. Goal. For the first time in his life, Cale Thorn wasn't just responding to what was going on around him. He was making it. They didn't say anything about it. Not at first. Not the time Cale saw that Alyssa was listening more than talking. The way she came to community meetings early, stayed late, and remembered names was not like that. Not that Mom started bringing Zion small scientific kits or asking how his day was before giving him updates on his projects. What about Cale? He began to smile more. Not often, not wide, but real. He stopped looking into her reasons, answered her calls on the first ring. He even thought about what her favorite dish was, or if she constantly hummed to herself while reading. It wasn't flirting, not really. It was quieter than that, more gentle, like something getting in through the crevices they had both made to keep themselves safe. A few weeks into organizing the Thorn Initiative, they met at the community center on a Saturday to look over the first place they wanted to fix up. Zion came along with a worn-out rucksack full of snacks and comic books. The electricity was out, no lights. There was only dust and sunlight coming through the smashed windows. Zion looked into every nook and cranny, acting like the room was a spaceship. Alyssa followed him and nodded like it was the most important tour she'd ever been on as he told her about the engine room and the command deck. Cale stood with his arms crossed beside the entrance and watched her. The CO, the woman who once offered to pay him to get a clean shirt. Now she looked different. Not because of her attire, hair, or the way she crouched down to tie Zion's shoe, but she looked like she was there, grounded, person. They sat on a seat outside after the tour while Zion drew in the dirt with a stick. Alyssa looked at Cale. He's great. Cale nodded. He's all I need. She gazed at him, and for a moment her voice got lower. You know, people think I grew up a certain way, but I didn't. He turned a little bit. No? Group homes. Care for kids. Long before I ever was affluent, I learned how to sound rich. Cale didn't answer straight away. Then, in a low voice, That's why you work like you're still trying to stay alive. Alyssa laughed softly and quietly. You see more than most people. I see you, he said. Not yet. It wasn't romantic. But that was something. A flash of comprehension, of faith.
of anything that couldn't be bought or traded, just built, like everything else that is worth retaining. The Thorn Initiative's inaugural event was supposed to be easy. Cale had been told that there would be no cameras, no speeches, and simply a quiet gathering at the community center with partners, volunteers, and a few families that the program had previously benefited. But as soon as he went in with Zion's little hand in his, he knew something was wrong. The room looked different. There were string lights shining on the ceiling. There was a stage at one end and chairs set up for a throng that was already 3 times greater than predicted. Banners, signs, and even the podium had Kael's name on them. He looked at Alyssa from across the room. She only grinned. When she came over, he muttered under his breath, "You said no speeches." She shrugged. "I lied, sort of." He rolled his eyes and didn't say anything else. They were in the front row. Zion was on Kael's lap, playing with his new Spider-Man watch. As community members took the stage, music played gently. They told tales, thanked people, and talked about how it had affected them. Then Alyssa came forward. She stared out over the room while wearing navy and no makeup save for what made her shimmer under the lights. The clapping stopped. She started by saying, "Tonight is about a man who didn't want to be recognized, who didn't want applause, but it still deserves it." She stared straight at Kael. "Once, he saved my life. Then he modified it." The room fell utterly silent. I've spent most of my life in rooms like this, speaking from stages, holding power that I didn't always get. But being next to Kael taught me what real leadership is: calm, patient, and never giving up. She stopped. Then they left the stage. Kael's eyes got bigger as she walked over to him. She took a little velvet box out of her blazer. "Oh no," he said quietly to himself, "not a chance." Alyssa grinned and knelt on one knee. The crowd gasped. Zion put his hand over his mouth and opened his eyes wide. Alyssa said, "Kael Thorn," in a crisp, steady voice. "You've made me responsible. You've put me to the test. You have motivated me. And you've helped me believe in things I thought I had forgotten." She opened the box. There wasn't a big diamond within. It was an old ring. Easy, powerful, like him. "I'm not asking because I owe you anything. I want to know because I can't picture living the rest of my life without you. Will you marry me?" Kael blinked. Then they laughed, loud, warm, and full. "Only if I get to choose the songs for the wedding." Everyone in the room clapped loudly. "Say yes, Daddy," Zion shouted. And Kael did. They didn't use the word wedding, not at first. Kael claimed he didn't want a big deal. Alyssa said yes. When they stood next to each other in the backyard of the new community center, which the Thorn Initiative had fixed up with donations and help from local volunteers, it seemed more like coming home than walking down the aisle. Zion stood between them, holding both of their hands. He was wearing a small gray suit and had a big smile on his face. The morning was cool and clear. There were no clouds in the sky. The woods behind them were on fire with gold and red. There weren't any chandeliers, no charts for seating. There were only folding chairs, food trucks, and actual people, neighbors, friends, and families who had helped build the fund. Kael had on a clean white shirt and navy pants. Alyssa wore a basic dress with no sleeves, no veil, no high heels, just her, in a real and honest way. Before the officiant could finish, Kael responded, "I do." Everyone laughed. Alyssa smiled. "Me too. Forever." They kissed under a canopy of autumn leaves, and the crowd roared as if they were cheering for themselves, as if their narrative belonged to everyone who had ever been ignored or not given enough credit. After that, Cale snuck away to the small garage around the corner as Zion danced with volunteers and Alyssa welcomed guests. There was an old truck inside, his old truck, that one from that night, the one that got them all through the fire. He had been fixing it up for months, one piece at a time, not for sale, not for prestige. But there are some things that are worth retaining. Alyssa saw him there, cleaning grease off his hands. "You went away," she remarked. "Had to get your present." He threw her the keys. "What is this?" she inquired, catching them. "You saved me from drowning in a system I no longer believed in. It's only right that I give you something in return, something that brings back memories of where it all began." She unlocked the door. There was a small plaque on the dashboard that said, "Being nice can save a life sometimes. It saves 2 people at times." Alyssa smiled. "You forgot 3. Cale looked like he didn't understand. She pointed out the door. Zion waved from the window while carrying a juice box and still wearing his outfit. Cale nodded his head. Yes, 3. They drove the truck out of the lot together, with Zion in the back seat and the music playing softly. The city moved slowly past them, as if it had finally chosen to slow down and let them breathe. And here's the deal. Things didn't suddenly get easier. There were still bills to pay, still problems. There were still times when the world reminded Cale that certain people would always perceive him in the wrong light. But now, he was not by himself. He had a friend, a voice at the table, a sign with a name on it, and a tiny boy who was sure that his father was a good man to follow. Lesson? Don't ever think that your narrative doesn't matter. Don't believe the idea that you have to pay back your compassion with money. Sometimes having dignity is the best kind of wealth. You can't buy or sell the deepest affection. And what is the biggest change? Someone like Kyle has to choose to do the right thing even when no one is watching. Because hidden worth is worth something. If you think that one small act of kindness may transform the world, sign up.